Welcome back to the Joyous Journeys in Life and Business podcast. Today, I'm very excited to introduce you to my guest, Louise O'Reilly. Welcome, Louise.
Hello. Thank you so much for the invitation. I've just noticed my camera's all gone messed up because we altered something. So I'm just going to mess around with that for a second.
Lots of techno issues today.
Yeah, the joys of technology, hey, but it does make our lives a lot easier, sometimes a lot harder.
Absolutely. It's a bit both ways. For those of you who don't know Louise is a Warrwa-Noongar woman creating cultural inclusion, diversity, equity, and allyship in business with her profound work. She works with entrepreneurs to develop expansive leadership that creates a positive impact in the world, including how to be a true ally to our most marginalized people. I want to say that I personally am a member of Louise's Inclusion Creators Collective membership, and absolutely love the way that Louise guides me and others to really unpack our unconscious biases and just learn how to create more inclusive and safer space for the most marginalized people in society. Louise, firstly, thank you for being here, but thank you for your amazing work. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today to talk about this stuff. It's something that I feel really deeply about, and I just love the space that you hold in this niche so well.
Oh, thank you. And it's my two favorite things, talking about inclusion, diversity, equity, and allyship, and talking. So I'm all for this. Thank you so much for inviting me.
We have some things in common.
Oh, of course.
Love it. Louise, tell us about your journey to doing this work. How did this start? How did you arrive in this space?
Oh, well, I arrived in this space by being born, in all honesty, because my mother is Aboriginal, my father is non-Aboriginal, so my father's heritage is Scandinavian, majority Scandinavian, and my mum's heritage is Aboriginal, and that's how that side of the family identifies. So really, it's being born into it in this day and age, into the Australian context. And growing up as a small child, I really did notice how different communities of people were treated differently. And I definitely observed how my family and my Aboriginal community were treated differently within our wider community, the township that we were in. And I always asked myself the question, why was that? And I think it's really quite sad, actually, to think that a child, I started asking these questions in my mind when I was probably around 5 or 6 years old. So that's a really early time to start observing how differently people are treated based on how they identify or the community that they belong to. And in my little mind, the only thing I could see was that we were constantly excluded or not treated in as nice a way as the white community were. And so I started drawing these really sad conclusions about myself and my community that, maybe we're bad, or maybe we're wrong, or maybe we shouldn't exist, or we're unwelcome. So all these things started happening, and I want to talk about it because I don't think children should ever have to go through that particular experience where you don't feel like you belong in your own country. You don't belong anywhere, even though this is our home. And that kind of went on for a long time. And it had some really big mental wellness effects on me, really. Identity is such a big part of who a human is. And there was part of me, I've always identified as Aboriginal, and I've always felt that is who I am. My heart tells me, my Wirran, my spirit tells me that's who I am. But I was told by community, by all these little social cues, that that's not who people want around. That's not what people want to be with them. That's not who they want to communicate. That's not who they want to include. So it was really hard growing up and trying to work out who I was and how I fit in the world, because I knew I didn't fit. So that had some really bad effects on me mentally. But the big thing that came into when I actually stepped into the business kind of side of it and went, I've actually got to do something about this, was when I was pregnant with my first baby. And I was so overjoyed. It was such a magical, wonderful thing to fall pregnant with my first child. But then it hit me so hard that I'm going to be birthing my baby into this world that didn't have the greatest effect or impact on me. And I'm going to bring this baby into the world. So I just knew from that point, I had to do something. And I had this feeling within me, I have to change something to make it so my child doesn't experience what I did, even if that means changing the world. So that's what I always say. I don't care. I'm going to change the world for my babies and all the babies so they don't have to feel the same things that I felt. They don't have to experience the same kinds of exclusion, discrimination and racism, colorism that I experienced, genderism, sexism, all those things I experience. So it's not just a singular kind of discrimination. It is a discrimination based on many communities that I belong to. And I was just like, that's it. That's what needs to be done. So that's how I did it.
Wow. I mean, that hit me right in the chest when you said, I started doing this work because I was born. And I knew what you were saying there. I read between the lines. That's pretty powerful. I'd love to know, what age was it that really started to impact on your mental well-being?
Oh, I'll get into that in a second, but I just was wondering, can I do a quick acknowledgement of country before we go any further?
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Beautiful, beautiful. So for those of you who don't know what an acknowledgement of country is, it's something that is very customary to the Aboriginal community to do, but it's becoming more of a cultural practice that the wider community are doing too. And it's a way of acknowledging the custodians of the lands where we're having meetings or events or things like that from. So I, Louise O'Reilly of the Warrwa-Noongar people, would like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional and ongoing custodians of the lands and waters on which I'm coming to you from. I pay respects to the elders here. I thank them so much for their community guidance, their leadership, their love, their support. And I always feel like crying when I say this because I just have so much love for our elders and so much respect for them in everything that they do. And I also wish to pay respects to the custodians of the lands on which you're listening from, and pay respects to the elders in whatever title they refer to themselves on the lands on which you're from as well. So I always get emotional doing an acknowledgement of country because it is just so special to do.
It really is. It really is. And, I acknowledge the Gumbaynggirr people, and in particular the Garbi elders, who are the traditional custodians and elders of the land of the northern part of the Gumbaynggirr country on which I live, work and play. I do acknowledge in our notes the Gumbaynggirr people, and that this podcast is recorded on Gumbaynggirr country. And I just really acknowledge and thank the elders, both past, present and emerging. Certainly their connection to the land and the waters here is profound, and, absolutely recognise that these are unceded lands, and, it always has been and always will be Aboriginal land. So very grateful to live on this country.
Absolutely. So to all the Gumbaynggirr mob out there, Ginnegay, I say hello to you, Ginnegay. Here on Noongar country, we say Kaya. Kaya is hello. It's also yes. Yeah. So there you go. So on to your question that you just asked me.
Yeah.
What age did I start feeling that? It would have been around the 5-6-year-old age that I really started thinking about it. And what I also found,
that is just so young. I was expecting you would say, the teen years started to kick in, but that just goes to show how young these subliminal messages that children receive about their identity what kind of a toll that has, the awareness. And I know even as a teacher, I've seen that, I've seen children coming to school, and it's almost around that same age of that, noticing that they're different, noticing that they're, they don't have the same lunches as other kids, or they don't have the same belongings as the other kids, they don't have the same uniform, or, health as other kids. It's really, really noticeable. Just, wow, it started to take its toll on you that early.
Yep. And I actually found that the children were very accepting and very open and loving. So it was very accepting at that age. But I found that discrimination was actually from the adults. It was from, the authority figures. Parents. It was from the teachers, the parents, the police, the whoever. It is actually the discrimination from adults onto children, which was the terrible, horrible part. And you certainly did see that. And certainly within my school community, I noticed there was lots of exclusion. And there was like these kind of attempts at inclusion. So things like murals with Aboriginal artwork, so community art pieces were done. Certainly participation in like a NAIDOC day, and things like that happen. But what I then drew, the conclusion I drew in my own mind as a child was, okay, well, I'm not included, our culture is not included in any other part, and throughout the whole year. But come something like a NAIDOC day, we're front and center. And it's a really, to me, it was an icky feeling. I had a really icky feeling that my existence as an Aboriginal person didn't matter until those days. And so in my mind, I kind of thought, they just don't see us. They just don't see us. That's okay. They don't see us. But then when those days came around, I realized they do see us. They know we're there, but they're actually ignoring us the entire time. So that is a whole different level of rejection that you feel from your community, because we're social beings. Everyone's a social being, and we all want to belong to multiple types of communities. And especially I felt going to school, we had to go to school, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a place that's necessarily safe for us. And it's not a place that we feel like we belong or we're wanted. So it's very difficult to attend things like schools and other kinds of social spaces that are outside family. So yeah, it was really quite early on, but it didn't really hit that hard because you're still a kid. You still just have fun and, you kind of let things go. But it wasn't until it was in my teens when it started to hit really hard, because I could see within myself that it's actually easier to exist in society if you're not Aboriginal. And I don't have the stereotypical look of an Aboriginal person. Let me be clear though, I look like an Aboriginal person because I am an Aboriginal person, but there is this stereotype image of what an Aboriginal person looks like. I don't fit that image. So I can exist in society without people knowing I am Aboriginal. And I'm feeling a bit emotional right now. And to think what went through my mind was I could choose to not identify, and that could lessen my heartache. It could lessen the pain. It could make my life easier to exist as a human. But what I realized was, and I did try it for a little while to just see, could I exist in this way? Because it's really, really hard. I realized it was harder to deny myself my Aboriginality. It was so much harder because I was just an empty shell. I was just my outside appearance. There was no depth to me. There was no soul to me. there was no spirit to me without my Aboriginality, because that's who I am, and that's what I've always been called to. That's what my ancestors are calling me to identify as and be. So damn, it's really, really difficult. And I actually wrote a bit about my backstory and all those difficult challenges that I went through in a book. It was just I feel it's so important to talk about it that I contributed a chapter to the book is called A Woman's Journey to Empowerment. And in that chapter, I talk about all these little bits and pieces, and another big piece that kind of was the final piece of the puzzle in terms of me coming into this particular role, because I've actually been in this business for I think 3 years, maybe 2 years. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not one for dates and keeping dates like that. But I have been involved in this kind of work and talking about inclusion for many years on a voluntary space, but I was spending so much time in it. I was like, why don't I just make it my job? And that way I can just continuously keep doing it and still feed my babies, still get paid for it, so I can put a roof over their head, feed them, pay the bills, but do this world-changing work at the same time.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I also wanted to just really pick up that sliding doors moment of matrescence and how that was a particular poignant moment in time where you drew that line in the sand and said enough. You know, it's like that moment that you realize that you were creating new life, and continuing on those ancestral lines, that, you know, your way of claiming ownership over that was to make even better impact, bigger impact for your children and all children. You talk about that pregnancy and, you know, whether like how that came about. Obviously we know how that came about.
Well, you know, I don't think Facebook's appropriate space for that. or your podcast, maybe.
the matrescence side of it, you know, that going from maiden to mother, and how impactful that was in becoming not only the mother of your children or your mother of that child at that pregnancy, but in fact the mother of all children.
Yeah, absolutely. And children and youth are particular groups that I hold so much space and love for. And I've always felt very drawn to this particular group, to support them, to listen to them, to provide them guidance and love and all the good stuff with that. So it just didn't kind of happen just as being a mom. In the lead up to that, I had a lot of background in working with youth and children. And they're so amazing and so important. And I also think that those particular groups aren't recognized or included in our society either. And they are so amazing. And so that was part of it. But I think what did it for me, what kind of tipped me over the edge, was this realization that I'm going to be a mum. And it's like the mama bear spirit turned on. It was like this, and I do see it as both like this bear kind of nurturing but fierceness, but also like a fierceness of a lioness as well. And it's really weird. I work with visuals a lot, so they're the kind of images that I draw with those kinds of energies. And I just knew that so many people kept saying this thing over and over. And this is something that I've heard my whole life growing up. That's the way it's always been done. That's the way it's always been done. And to just accept the way things are, and it's the way it's always been done. And my brain works differently. I can recognize my brain works differently to a lot of people's. And I could never understand, if people are suffering in some way, why we would settle for what is if there is a continuation of suffering in some way. So I'm always like, well, then let's change it. Let's change the thing. And there's so much fear with that change. But because it is so ingrained, that's the way it always is, just going to have to put up with it. This is what we've put up for centuries, or this is what our ancestors always had to work through. We can change it. We absolutely have the power to change it. And I knew that I had to do it. I just had to make the decision that I'm going to do something about it, because I'm not here to change anyone. I'm not here to make anyone do anything. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. So with that kind of mindset, what's left? It's me. What am I going to do to change it? How am I going to do the things to change it? How am I going to change myself so I no longer support these systems that are discriminating, that are oppressive? And it really is a process of breaking down the unconscious biases within yourself, becoming aware of those things, becoming aware of my own privileges, looking at how I can actually make an impact in the world. And it doesn't have to be a global scale that everyone knows who you are or anything like that. It could literally be that you did something that made someone feel seen or heard, or their identity validated. And that can really change a life. And that can really change the trajectory that someone's future has. So how can I do that? How can I change my language so that it is supportive or inclusive? How can I alter my behavior in a way that is inclusive or supportive? How can I run my business in a way that feels welcoming, that values difference, that feels safer to be in? So that's the kind of things that I was asking myself. And I'm a big believer in role modeling. So if people see what I'm doing, they love this vision of a future that I want to have, you know, one where every single person feels safe and free to express themselves in whatever way they feel drawn to, their soul calls them to. That's the kind of future I want. I don't want people to fear discrimination. I don't want people to be oppressed. And I'm trying to make steps to get there. And if you love that vision too, you can come along the ride.
Absolutely. You know, it brings me to that, to mind that saying, you know, if not you, then who? If not now, then when?
Yeah.
And I know I whip that one out every now and again with my kids, but, you know, it really does come to mind is like, who's going to do this work? And if it's not you, who? And if it's not now, then when? You know, because I think it starts with us. And even though it may just, you know, validate someone's identity or make someone feel seen or safe for the very, very first time when they're out socializing outside of that family unit, that always goes on to have a ripple effect.
Yeah.
You know, in the best possible way. And it's about making those positive ripples rather than making tsunamis that, you know, wipe out whole communities of people and, you know, just continue to perpetuate these oppressive systems that we already have. It's huge. It really is like just something so small can make such a difference.
Absolutely.
It's just turning that dial and then keep turning it. Keep turning it, because it's a life's work, isn't it? It's not a season's work, it's a life's work. Like this work is a life's work, not a season's work.
No, absolutely. It's but it's beautiful.
It is.
It's beautiful work too, because it really is inner work that you're doing. It really is communing with yourself, and looking and asking yourself, who do I want to be? What do I want to create in this world? How do I want to show up for myself? How do I want to show up for my family? How do I want to show up for my clients or my audience? And really making conscious decisions on, okay, how do I make this thing happen? Because we are just bombarded as soon as we're born with social conditioning. We want to feel like we belong. We want to feel love, and we want to be accepted. We want all those things. So we're always collecting information about what's acceptable in terms of our society and what's not acceptable. And we will do the things that are acceptable so we can fit within the community. We will belong and be accepted in the community, because that's actually something we require as humans. We require that for our survival. And so if you're seeing people mistreated, and so they're ostracized from community and society, and they're not wanted, quite often we'll pick up those messages, those stories, that they are lesser humans, or they don't belong, or I can't, or even if you don't think that, you might just think, I can't actually associate with those people, because then I might be ostracized as well. I might not belong as well. So you pick up all these little things. And if if you've been listening to Sharon, I'm sure Sharon said, we work on autopilot a lot. So there's lots of these things on going on in our unconscious. And most of our lives, it's just autopilot.
Yeah.
And so we are behaving in ways, and we are speaking in ways that actually are misaligned to our own value system. So we might have a value of inclusion and kindness, but our autopilot makes us do something in a way that makes someone feel bad, or discriminates or excludes in some way, and we don't even know we're doing it.
So true. Which really, I think for people listening, and this is definitely what I've gotten out of your work, and also Tara Browen's work as well, who I've followed and done some of her anti-bias work, is, it doesn't make you a bad person.
No.
But to do the work is what helps you. We're going to be called out. We're going to make mistakes on this journey. And that's okay. Like, it doesn't make you a bad person, and I think that is just such an important message for people who are starting out on this work, because, we do often really just want to get everything right. And the reality is, it's sitting in the uncomfortable of an acceptance of, I'm not always going to get it right. There's going to be things that are, not seen or not understood, and we can work with that. It's not a reflection on us as being, good or bad. It's not about that, but like, as you say, often we're actually not living in alignment with what our true values are. And by doing this work, it's like taking off the blinkers to see those unconscious biases and being able to address them, like they can be things that are so subtle. Things that people say, like I particularly notice people's vernacular, that, people say things, and I'm sure that there's things that I say, but there's been words that I have removed completely out of my vocabulary that I will not say. I will not allow spoke in my own home. I will, and it's because they were words that, I hear people still use, but they're not thinking that it's actually inappropriate or could be, it's perpetuating marginalization. They don't even see that, it's not a reflection that they're good or bad or otherwise. It's why this work is so freaking important.
It is. And language comes under culture. So whatever language, the way casual language or formal language, it all comes under culture. And so I want your listeners to really understand that you have a certain paradigm of your own culture. And within that paradigm, it's perfectly acceptable to say a lot of things. But then you have other cultures, and these are marginalized cultures. And when you use that particular language, it is microaggressions. It is offensive, because those particular languages, or the words you say or phrases you use, usually are linked to something in history that is actually quite terrible. And how language progresses a lot of the time is that it will turn from something horrible, and then there's a recognition that this word or this phrase harms this community, so I'm going to keep using it. And then as it evolves, you keep using it until it becomes like just casual language. And the actual origin of where that came from is no longer known to the culture who was predominantly using it. But the origin of where it comes from is still very well known and documented and shared within the marginalized community that it harms.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, this is so true. One of the words I know I will not use is the word slay. You know, just remove that completely out of my vocabulary, unless it's absolutely, I'm certain that it's contextual. And, you know, there's lots of words like this that, you know, we appropriate the language of other cultures who are still marginalized. And I mean, that's a whole, we could do a whole episode on that.
Just on words that are inappropriate to use.
Just on words. I've got a reel sitting in draft that's been there now for a while, and I just so want to share it around, you know, the use of that particular word. And, you know, it's just, you know, I know my daughter's come home and said it, and, you know, and I'm just like, we need to have a chat about that word, like, you know, because I don't think you know the context, and I only knew because I went looking for it. So it's that's just, yeah, it's huge, isn't it? I know
there
that
are heaps.
The Paralympics was actually a great opportunity for, you know, for open conversation in my household around, you know, the use of appropriate language to talk about, you know, people with disabilities and, you know, preferencing people before the disability and, you know, those sorts of things. And it just, it's actually a really great learning for anyone who's listening and wants to, you know, just do some work around this. Like, I would say start with language, because when you start exploring, you know, people will say, you know, PC words of what's politically correct or not correct. When you actually scratch away at the surface and, you know, and not go down that path, that you really realize how harmful the words we say that are casual language are just, you know, perpetuating the problem.
Yep. And, you know, the thing is, quite often people will use political correctness as, oh, this is going too far. There's nothing political about it. There absolutely is nothing, but there is a lot human about it.
Yeah.
So if you, as a human, know some word you're using is harming another human in some way, you then have a choice. You can choose to continue using it, or you can choose to not use it, but you now have the knowledge that that's harmful, and it's your choice how you want it. It's a humanitarian thing. It's not a political thing.
It's not political. It's so true. It's so true. You know, whenever that conversation, the PC conversation comes up, I usually duck for cover, because that's exactly how I see it. Is no, it's not. There's nothing political about it. You know, we're politicizing it to mask the fact that somebody's getting hurt, much like the structures in our society. Sadly, but true, right? That's how it works. Louise, I'd love to, and I think we've probably just covered this, but I'm going to go there specifically around coaching spaces. So talking about the coaching industry, because you work with a lot of coaches and healers, you know, people in the online entrepreneurial space. Why is anti-bias work so important in this particular space?
Well, the main reason it's so important is because it's meant to be a healing space, right? And if you are going in and you're saying, I'm a coach, and I'm going to help you heal in some way. And I mean, this is coaching for anything. Even if you're a business coaching is about healing still. It's all about healing. So, but then you don't have, I guess, an idea or a recognition that your own biases, your own coaching space that you're creating, your own systems that you're using in your business actually can be unsafe for marginalized people. So the space you're setting up, you're going, hey, come here, come work with me. This is a healing space. I'm going to work with you on all these things. And yet you're not doing the work to recognize your own biases and how you might be contributing to some form of harm or oppression in some way. And then you're working with people you can harm them greatly in that space, because they come into that space expecting that they're going to be very vulnerable. They're probably going to open up to you a lot. And so it's like a whole nother level of allowing a human into your life is when you take someone on as a coach. And then to have that person that you've put so much trust into do something. It could be a word, it could be a phrase, it could be an ideology, it could be something along those lines while you're in that vulnerable space, and they harm you. It is so dangerous. And this is probably a very big reason why a lot of marginalized people don't work with people who are considered the highest privileged people. If they are in that coaching space, they will tend to find coaches who look like them, identify like them, because they have the same, they're not the same. I don't want to say the same, because I think that's incorrect. We all have individual experiences, but there's a greater level of understanding of the human existence that person is having if you can identify the same, if you have the same kinds of communities. So I see lots of coaches saying, you know, I really want to be inclusive and I want to have lots of diversity in my clients because I value diversity. I think it's important and all this and that. But then there is a lack of preparation of space to make sure your space is safe for them to come into. And it is quite unfair to expect marginalized people to step into your space if you haven't prepared it for them. If you're not doing the work to decolonize your mind or identify what your privileges are, to question some of the stories or the biases about different ethnic groups there are, to look at what do you think about colorism, what do you think about the genderism, what do you think about racism, how are you contributing to those systems and upholding those systems before you invite people to come into that space. Because it can cause a lot of harm. But even in terms of the coaching space, understand that the cultures are different too. So something that is standard practice for coaching for, I'm going to say Wadjala people, so white people. And I do want to actually touch on whiteness in a second, if that's okay with you, because I think it's really important. It's very different the way we relate to each other in terms of relationships, kinships, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. In terms of being a coach for someone whose culture is based on community is extremely different. And so if someone comes to you and their culture is based on community and comes to a coach whose culture is based very much on individualism and self-growth and achievement, you can potentially cause so much damage and so much harm to a whole family and a whole community. And I've seen this happen. And the title coach gives so much authority. And then when that person goes ahead and does what that coach advises, it really, really is very damaging to a whole community, because that member is very valued within the community. And if they are being asked to remove themselves from a community in some capacity, it's just, it's horrendous. It's horrendous, the damage that it can cause.
Yeah, that's, you know, I think that's just, it's so important. It's so important that, you know, these things are made aware, we become aware of all of that as coaches. And, you know, different cultures, different communities, you know, there are different ways of being in community, and, you know, it can be very different, but it's really important to know how, you know, how those people can feel safe and feel supported.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know,
the other thing is, of course, as well, language, you know, it's finding and using appropriate language to support the people in those spaces.
Yep, absolutely. And that's, and this is why I do what I do as well, because I have the understandings based in terms of a white culture in Australia. I have that background because that's part of my family is that. And then I also have this knowledge in terms of an Aboriginal culture as well. So I can bring that into the coaching. And so if any of your listeners are interested in getting kind of coaching on doing any kind of anti-racism work or any kind of inclusion work, I encourage you to please make sure the person you're engaging actually has the lived experience within the culture that they're talking about. Because there is no way another person can understand the complexities or the nuances that life as an Aboriginal person or life as a whatever other group of people person has. There's no way of being able to understand that completely and share that and coach you through that. So you actually do need to engage with marginalized people to unpack all this stuff. And this is also why I say I'm a coach and a mentor, because I will put on my coaching hat when we go within you to work out what your values are, what your inspiration is, how you want the world to be, how you want to show up, all that kind of stuff. That's my coaching hat stuff. But then I also have to teach about culture and teach the things that you would never have experience about because it's not your culture. And that's where I put my mentor hat on and go, well, let me tell you about how this works in this culture, because I have that knowledge. And so I can share that with you. So it is a coach mentor arrangement that you'll have with those particular groups. Now, I did mention I want to talk about whiteness.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I really want to talk about whiteness, and I probably need to talk about it a whole lot because I've been thinking about it more and more and more. And I've been thinking about how much this term or identity of whiteness is stealing from people who identify as white. It is stealing so much from you because there actually is no such thing as whiteness. There's no culture called whiteness. It is like this collective group of people who are essentially all around the world who are lumped in to this space called white or whiteness. Yeah. And it's stripping you of so much rich culture. It strips you of your heritage. It strips you of, just things like family recipes, rituals that you do, customary activities, the cultural dress that you have, the types of art, the types of music, the different language you use, the way you gather together, the special events, the ceremonial stuff. It strips people of so much that I believe a human needs to feel whole. When you identify as white, you're not attached to a land. You're not connected to a space. You're not connected to a people. You're not connected to a community. And I think every culture is beautiful. Every single culture, the language, the colors, the dress, the ceremony, the food, everything is beautiful. And when we have this concept of whiteness, you are losing out on so much in your life, which is why I always encourage the people that I work with, okay, let's go back to your heritage. What's your family line? Who are your ancestors? What did they do? And let's connect back through that way. And I think even just doing that kind of thing can help lessen cultural appropriation. Yes. Because people can see how special our culture is and how it fills us. It feeds our soul in a certain way. And that beautiful experience that you get, people go, oh, wow, that was amazing. That's so beautiful. And I think everyone should have that experience. I'm going to take that and then I'm going to share it on. So it's like almost like a selfless act. I'm going to take what I experienced and share it on because everyone should be able to experience this thing. Not realizing that's not for them to share.
Yeah, that's right.
That's only for that group of people to share with whom they feel is okay to share with. But the truth is everyone has culture. So you have that in your culture. You have that feeling in your culture, but whiteness strips it from you. Yeah, it's such a shame.
Thank you for that reflection. It is so true. It is so true. And as you know, as a child, my best friend was an Aboriginal girl, and so I spent a lot of time with an Aboriginal family. I would spend lots of time with them, and it's just really, it's so true. Like, it is so true. And I think I had that awareness when I was a 10-year-old, that, like, we kind of don't have this. We don't have this. There's something different that is muted in my life growing up. And this isn't a pity me story, but you're absolutely right. And it wasn't until actually it was around about the time that my third child was born that I really started to delve into my own family history. And I haven't had a DNA test yet, but I'm still going to do that at some point, because I think there's more to the story that I haven't gotten. But but the parts that I do know were just, it does feel like there's more a part of my understanding about my culture and how I came here, and and all of those things that is incredibly, I guess, I don't know whether validating is the word, but it does make you feel more whole as a human and less strict of that culture. Because you're right, like a white culture is just a melting pot of nothingness. It is stripping away what was over centuries, and it is there somewhere, but you've got to dig for it. You've really got to dig for it to find to find what's what. And it's pretty significant. But you're absolutely right, and I think this is why there is so much cultural appropriation in whiteness, because people feel robbed by their whiteness and see these beautiful cultures from around the world that are so rich in music, in art, song, story, all of the things, kinship, all of the things. And because those messages have been preserved, I mean, as best as possible, given the circumstances, be they horrid, I think that is definitely why there is so much, so much appropriation of those cultures. It really comes back to a feeling of lack, in white communities.
Yeah. And I'll be real here. Some people just go out to do it just to do it because they know they can, and systemically we don't have protections to protect culture.
Yes.
So this is part of the problem. We don't have anything in law to protect culture, so anyone can do it without any repercussions happening.
You can copyright or trademark a business name, but you can't put that on a culture.
No, you can't have intellectual property for a group of people. So all those kinds of things come into play, but a lot of the time, like, it is not intentional. It is like, this is so beautiful. I want to share this. I've had this amazing experience and I want to share this on, because isn't it beautiful to share these beautiful experiences? But like I said, every single culture has them. We just need to start talking with family and friends and connecting the dots and doing the ancestry tests and doing a little bit of digging about the history of places. And I mean, just the other month, my husband was having a look at his own history, and he found that where his family originated from in Ireland, their group of people were the first people to wear pants. And so that's
they wore kilts before that, I assume.
Well, I'm not sure how it worked, but yeah, apparently they're the first people to wear pants. So just little things like that. It's like, my family can be proud because we were the first people to wear pants. Just little things like that, and just little kinds of ceremonies. I had another client who they found out that there's a certain season, and on a special day in that particular month, they the whole community would go out and pick berries. And that berry picking was also a form of meeting new people or courting as well. So you spend a whole day picking berries, and potentially you can pick up someone you eventually want to court or marry someday. So just little things like that are so special to have and know. And I also believe that something that I've always thought, that I need to know my story before I was born. So my story before I was born are my grandparents and my great-grandparents and so on, so on, so on. That forms who I am, part of who I am. It still runs in my DNA. It still makes a part of my story. And what I do in my lifetime will make up the story of my grandchildren and great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. So it impacts us all along. We're still connected. Because we exist, we're connected, and that forms part of our story. And when we don't know where we have come from, who our family is, and the things that they have done, achieved, suffered through, all those things, I find that it can feel a bit lost. How do I fit into all of this? Knowing that shows us how we fit into this world, how we fit into the whole grand scheme of the universe kind of thing. And it does matter that we're here. We're here for a reason. We're here to make up part of that story. And this is also why I want to choose today to be a good ancestor. So I'm getting emotional again. I always think to myself, what can I do in my lifetime so future generations can be proud of me? Can say, my great-great-grandmother did this thing. Isn't that amazing? My great-great-grandmother changed the way we were doing things in our family, which wasn't helping us. Or, you know, my great-grandmother stood up for what she believed in. She wouldn't put up with what is. And she did everything she could to change it. Oh, I am getting emotional.
All the feels. Oh, Louise, that's just, really, really profound. And, you know, I don't doubt for a second that would stir something in everybody, you know, because that's our lineage. That's, you know, into the future, you know, that's, we're here to create a better place. And, you know, I think it's so, you know, one of the ways that I try and live is to remember, like, I think, what will I regret? Or, you know, what am I likely to regret? Therefore, you know, try and live, I guess, in avoiding regret, because it's just too short. We're here for like just that speck of time when you look over generations, you know, from like, you know, from your ancestors, you know, 60,000 years, and, you know, there's going to be 60,000 more. Like, we've got an opportunity, but it's a small window in the scheme of all of those years, you know, or that time, be it linear or non-linear. We really only have a small chance when we're here. And, you know, in terms of my culture and my people, the time that Australia has been colonized is so short. It's, and this is where this problem is, you know, when people say, you know, get over it, it was a long time ago, can't we move on from this? The thing for us is, because our knowledge keeping is so amazing, it is so powerful, that those events are right now for us. So, for instance, I know the exact people who were standing on what we call now Kings Park, what we call Karakumba. I know the exact people who are standing on there and watched the very first ship come through the river. I know who those exact people are. They saw the ships come in. So you can't say that it's a long time when you know them
the exact people. You know them by name, you know those things. You know their family, you know everything that's happened since that point. Before any of this was even here in Boorloo in Perth, there weren't all these buildings, there weren't these skyscrapers. We have that knowledge. Yeah. We have the knowledge before the seas rose. So there were communities here that if you come to this place now is actually under the sea. That's how powerful our knowledge keeping is. And it all continuously exists. And it's important that we keep that knowledge, because this is how we grow. This is how we expand as a community. This is how we connect as a community and understand how we're connected to one another, how we know our stories and our dreamings, and all the different multi-level dimensions of those things.
Yeah. It's just such a short amount of time. It was not long ago.
No. It
was not long ago. And like you know who those people were. And I know who my people were too, who came out on boats, stole a bunch of onions.
Yep.
Sent to the penal colony. It's not that long ago.
No.
It's not that long ago. We have the stories, we have the records. You have the stories, we have the records. The records don't obviously cover all of the true records. We know that. We know the atrocities that were done. But it is such a short amount of time in the scheme of things, and there is so much healing to be done, but we get to do it together. We don't have to do it in a silo. We are all connected. We are all here. And it starts with every single one of us. Every single one of us on this planet can make a difference in this area. Absolutely. And
we're always thinking, how do we make things better? How do we make things better? And there is this resistance to changing a way that a lot of society does things. But if you can look at it from a different perspective, rather than looking at it as a form of change, we're denying our ancestors, they built this thing, we need to honor them. I kind of think, wouldn't it be more honoring to recognize that there is something that's not quite working, and say, okay, this system was built, this is the knowledge and capacity and resources and whatever input they had at this time, they did the best within this thing. And sometimes not the best, sometimes they were very malicious in terms of hurting or harming or preventing people from doing certain things. But wouldn't it be more honoring to now go, how can we make this better for more people? How can we include more of our community in the stuff we do every single day? How can we listen at a deeper capacity? How can we have more compassion? How can we express more kindness? How can we connect at a deeper level? How can we build community in a different way that includes more people and they feel more loved and valued? And asking those kinds of questions. So it's not about changing our society or our culture. It's more asking, how do we innovate? How do we innovate this so it's something better than it's ever been before? And wouldn't your ancestors love that? Wouldn't they be thinking, oh gosh, I wish I had thought of that? Or I'm so proud of you for doing that. For it might seem like a big task or hard, but you did it. You did it, and that's amazing. And then wouldn't our children and our grandchildren thank us and say, thank you for not putting up with a system that wasn't working, procedures that weren't working, ways of treating each other that wasn't working for everyone, because now we can benefit from the decisions that you made. So true. It seems like a much nicer thing to do. Really.
Absolutely. I'm down for it. Oh, Louise, I mean, look, I may as well just wipe out the next few questions because I just think we've just gone so deliciously deep on things that we weren't planning on talking about today. But I'm just finding this conversation so rich and delicious, and just always appreciate your, what you bring to the table in this space. It's just, it's nuanced in the right way every time, like with just all the flavors, and I love it. This question is going to seem probably more superficial after we've been that deep, but,
Okay.
but let's go there anyway, because here's the juice. This is where we get an opportunity for people who are just at the very beginning, who are going, wow, like, I mean, I'm not at the very beginning, but I still have a lot of work to continue to do. As I say, it's a life's work, not a season. I feel like I entered this work, probably in childhood, and that's just continued on. But, I just want to say, for people who are starting out, and for people who entrepreneurs, online business women, can you share with us some steps to creating inclusion and equity in our business? So just a bit of context for people listening. Louise did a training recently in my Solid membership, which was fabulous, where she outlined 4 steps to creating inclusion and equity in business. Can you maybe touch on some of those steps, Louise, and just what are the tangibles that people can do in this work they're starting out?
Yep, absolutely. So I did actually write them down, so I will have a look, because I create lots of different courses, online courses, and depending on what you want to do, I provide you with different types of steps. So in that particular training that we did, that I did in Sharon's group, the first step was acknowledging your privilege, and really just having a look at all the different things that class you as being privileged in some capacity. Now, I want to preface this with saying, being privileged doesn't mean your life necessarily is easy. It doesn't mean you don't go through hardships. It doesn't mean that people treat you good. That's not what it means. Privilege is something you were just born with. And it's based on a privilege scale or privilege system, and however you are as a person is marked on that system. So just know that more privilege doesn't necessarily mean bad or good, or less privilege doesn't mean bad or good. It just is based on this system. And when you can really understand the spaces where you are privileged in comparison to places where you might be marginalized or oppressed, this can really help inform you to understand the spaces where you can talk about the things that are not good. So if you are in that oppressed space, you can talk about what's not working in the system, how you're experiencing certain challenges that other people on the privileged end will not experience or go through. But then if you are on that privileged end, that informs you that you can become an ally for people who are at the oppressed end of that particular thing. And now there are lots of different, scales or spectrums of privilege. So one could be whether you have fair skin or dark skin. That is a particular spectrum. It could be whether you are rich or poor is another spectrum. It could be, and it can be down to things like, were you born into a stable family with two parents who loved and respected each other, in comparison to, maybe a single parent family, or maybe a family where it was quite a toxic relationship, that family. So there's lots of different things that come under that. It could be, have you always had access to clean drinking water? This is not something that everyone has. Have you always had access to medical treatments? This is not something that everyone has access to. So these are lots of different things you can look to yourself and see where are the spaces you are privileged and spaces you're not. The next thing you can look at is really trying to become aware of your unconscious biases. And now this is something you necessarily can't do on your own. You usually need someone to help facilitate this unpacking or awareness gaining. And it is you can do it on specific themes. So when I work in the Inclusion Creators Collective, I like to choose a certain topic per month to do the unconscious bias workshops. So some of those might be one on racism. We've had one on ethnic bias. We've had one on disability. We've had ones on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. This next one I'm going to actually be doing tomorrow is on genderism, sexism. So you can do it on a whole bunch of different stuff, but I do encourage you to find someone who you do feel energetically aligned with and do the work with. So that could be me, that might not be me. My energy is not for everyone, I understand that, but find someone who is, and I'm going to say who is marginalized, who creates this kind of courses or workshops, and work with them, because that is where you're going to get the real stuff and the real nuances behind them as well. And also, if you are listening, I am offering one of my unconscious bias workshops as well. So I'll provide that for free. If you have a look in the show notes, you'll find a code there. So I'll send that through to Sharon. You can access one. It's going to be on racism. So if you want to do some unconscious bias work on that, go and check that out through that link. But also in my workshops, once you become aware of them, we also work through, okay, now you're aware, what do you actually do with it? So that's a missing piece that sometimes there is when you become aware of some unconscious biases. Then we talk about knowing your niche. And I'm talking about your niche in terms, and now we're going to talk more into business now, your marginalized niche. So as a business owner or an entrepreneur, you have a set niche. And because business predominantly is built on this privilege system and the status quo, you're working with, so here's your dream clients are in this niche, right? You're only working with a certain amount of those clients, those most privileged clients, maybe the clients that look most like you, identify like you. But there is a whole bunch of clients who are your dream clients who need the thing that you're, they need the medicine that you're giving to the world, need the healing that you can provide. But because the way your business is set up, the way you're using your language, you're using your body, you're using your fonts, all the things,
yeah,
can be pushing them away and excluding them. And if you can become aware of that group of people and go, okay, well, how can I innovate my business in a way that, first of all, makes it inclusive and safe for those marginalized people to come into my space. But secondly, how to actually go through the whole journey, client journey with them to make sure that they are safe and valued and feel good through that whole process. Then the last thing you really want to do is look at business itself is quite damaging. Business itself and a lot of business gurus will teach you how to do business, how to structure business, how to do your marketing, how to do your branding, how to do all the little bits and pieces. But it comes from a lens of someone who's usually privileged. And so they don't understand how business as usual or the status quo of doing business actually is quite exclusive to people who are very privileged. So there are so many people who are in your niche, who are your dream soulmate clients, actually can't work with you because there are too many obstacles, too many challenges. So that's kind of how you can do it. But definitely start off with acknowledging your privilege and looking at doing some unconscious bias work. And I promise it will just start moving, rolling. Don't jump into it thinking you're going to sort it out all at once. It's just one step at a time, one step. And make sure you have support as well, because sometimes, and I myself am putting my hand up with this, sometimes you can find some kind of unconscious bias or some story hidden under the surface, which you can feel disgusted, you thought or had, or you could feel shocked about. And it can really start to make you question yourself and who you are. So make sure you have a support network in place when you're doing it. But it doesn't have to be like that. It can be really quite liberating.
Yeah, amazing. Lots of great takeaways there. And, you know, that for anyone listening who might be interested, that particular training is in Solid. It is actually part of our onboarding process. So part of coming into that container is to work on unpacking, you know, our privilege and understanding how to create safer, more inclusive and diverse, therefore diverse spaces. And, you know, I mean, it's always a work in progress, but it's so great to, you know, to have this knowledge and continue to grow with this knowledge. And for anyone wanting to get that that training, that unconscious bias workshop on racism, it is fantastic. It is such a great workshop. And I just want to really echo what you said, Louise, about the importance of having, you know, unconscious bias work facilitated by somebody who is marginalized, number one, and, you know, having it facilitated, number two, in order so you can get the right support, because it can be confronting what comes up, particularly, and I can't remember where it is, but in doing this awareness work, as you move through the phases of that work, there is a space, you know, sort of early on in the work where it can really start to like break down and challenge parts of your whole entire identity and be incredibly confronting and painful. And, you know, it's not wrong. It doesn't make you wrong at all, but you do need a certain level of, you know, nurturing and understanding and for space to be held for you during that work. So I just want to echo that. It is really, really important, you know, for anybody doing this work to do it in safe places where there's people who are able to do it and know what they're doing. Can't recommend Louise more highly enough, obviously, for doing this work, but you know, it is so great. Louise, I want to finish up on the question of what is, you know, we talk about allyship, and you know, I believe I have a fairly good understanding of what the word is, but because it gets used quite a lot in culture these days, I'd just love to get your, you know, your true meaning or essence of what allyship is, and you know, any sort of key message that you have for people who are wanting to be better allies. Because I love your TikToks on this, by the way.
Oh, I love the TikToks. I love doing it.
You're the only person that's got me to use TikTok. I only go on there to look at your content. The rest of the time, I'm not on there.
Well, that's a bonus. That's a big bonus for me. Thank you. So for allyship, to me, allyship is a verb. It's actually not a title. So you can't say I'm an ally. You can say I'm being an ally when you are actually doing stuff. So if you are putting the work to unpack your privilege, if you are doing the work to unpack your unconscious biases, if you are listening to marginalized communities and learning from those communities and then doing what they are asking you to do. So they will ask you for certain types of support. It might be, can you attend this protest? It might be, can you send a letter to your local representative? It could be, can you donate to this particular cause? Or are you able to, I don't know, man a barbecue? Whatever it is that they're asking of you as an ally, you're doing that thing. It could be things like making sure you've got captions on your videos or transcripts. It could be making sure you've got an interpreter. It could be making sure you do an acknowledgement of country at the start of every gathering that you have. You know, there are so many different bits and pieces. It could be something like on your website, online applications is not the only way to do it. If there's someone who's not tech savvy, they can give you a call. So it's about making it easier for people to access you, but making sure you also have the capacity to learn about that particular community and what's required from that community. Make sure that space is well set up for inclusion. It's set up for them already. So when they come to you, you're not rushing around going, oh my gosh, I've got to set this up to make sure that they are cared for. It's already done. It's already there waiting for them. And if you never get a client that uses that, that's okay too. But the thing is, if they choose to come with you, you're already got them in mind, thinking about how can I make their life easier? How can I reduce the challenges that they will experience in other businesses, but not in my business? Just things like that. How can I actually include them in my decision-making processes? Just things like that will really, really help.
I love that analogy that you use around, having a seat at the table and actually preparing that seat so that it's there vacant and ready for when they arrive, rather than everybody reshuffling around to try and make themselves fit at the table. And I'm sure we've all experienced that when we've arrived to something late and everybody's kind of had to reshuffle around, and it's sort of awkward, like everybody wants them there at the table, but there's like this awkwardness rather than, hey, we saved you a seat, like come on in, here's your spot, like right here, you've got everything you need, there it is, we're all here to support you. It's a very different vibe.
Yeah. And business is different in general. Gone are the yesteryears where you could say, this is who I am, this is what I do, or this is what I sell. That was enough for business. Now it's, this is who I am, this is what I sell, this is what I do, and this is what I stand for. Because you have to be more than just selling something now. You have to have a vision for how your business is impacting the world or the community in some way.
Yes.
And if you don't, potentially you're losing people who would normally shop with you or become a client because you aren't talking about what's important to you. I know that I seek out businesses, and if they say something like, and so many of our proceeds go to this particular charity, or we make sure we use environmentally friendly products, or we are working to a zero carbon emission, or those things help me make buying decisions. And if you don't have them, there's a good chance that I probably won't do business with you, because I don't know how that money is going to be impacted in the world on a larger scale through your business. So this is where just talking about social issues that we have in our community, you can start doing through business, and looking at, in terms of business, are you supporting the disability community? Are you supporting the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community? Are you supporting the LGBTQIA plus community? Are you supporting the older age community or the younger age community? All these things. How is your business ready for those communities? How is your business supporting those communities in basically pulling apart the oppression, getting rid of it, and actually liberating those communities to have full access to our society, to our businesses, and to, joy and thriving? How are you doing that? Also, if you do want to do a course specifically on businesses who want to be inclusive CEOs, I'm also got a free 3-day workshop. I never know whether to call it a course or a workshop. Let's call this one
workshop
probably
series?
it's probably more like a course. So it's 3 days. You'll get 3 emails, and it's 1 hour per course. And it's a bit cheeky, for Guck the status quo, you're here to be a socially conscious CEO. And that will outline everything in a much better way, much more detailed way, with pictures and everything for you if you want to do that. So I'll send that through as well. That's a free three-day thing as well. You get directly to your email, because in it, it's so much stuff. And in all honesty, I probably should charge for that because it is really, really good. But this work is just so important. A lot of the times I just think it's better to get it out there than to charge for it, because money in itself is a form of oppression too.
Yeah, it really is. Absolutely. Louise, I usually finish up with 3 questions that I ask all of my guests. I'd love to ask you, and these obviously I know you haven't prepared for these. How would your folks describe what you do for a living?
I don't know if I want to answer that. Well, because what I'm doing is essentially activism. My mom was actually really quite terrible. Well, actually, both my parents were quite terrified because the idea about activism and protesting what has been pushed onto them to not do. It's a bad thing. It's a bad thing. Bad people do that kind of stuff. So tree hugger was something I was often called, a tree hugger, which is not a very nice term. But in all honesty, they were terrified because I thought I'd be arrested or something for the work that I'm doing. But they're so proud. Yeah. So proud. So I would say terrified is the first word.
Yeah.
Proud. And
so double-edged, isn't it? I mean, yes, there are genuine, real fears there.
Yeah.
There are absolutely genuine, real fears there, which is
absolutely
the serious side to all of this. There is a danger.
Yeah, there is absolutely a threat in terms of safety in this kind of work, for sure. The last word, what would I put as the last word? I think they would just pretty much say it's me. It's who I've always been. It's how I've always been. I've always been the person to stand up against bullying and discrimination. My entire life, I've always been the one to question things. I've always been the one to go against authority, not to go against authority, but to speak up for human rights and justice.
Mm-hmm. What has been the most joyous part of your life and business to date?
I love hearing the stories. When I do a workshop with a group, so I'll do workshops within other people's groups, or I'll do my own courses in my academy or in my the Inclusion Creators Collective. But when I hear about the stories of how it has gone on to impact people in a different way, in a beautiful way, there's always tears because that's the whole purpose of it. The whole purpose of it is to make people feel like it's okay for them to exist as themselves and to be completely who they are, and they're loved and accepted, they belong, they're valued and cherished, and there are people there who really love them. So that's the biggest joy that I ever have, is seeing how that inclusion ripples happen in the world.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, Louise, where can our listeners find and follow you?
So you can follow me on my website. It is louiseoreilly.com.au. It is a little bit out of date, I'll be honest with you. There's a lot of stuff that I do, and I'm a solopreneur, so it kind of gets put on the back burner. So you can follow me there, but I'm predominantly on TikTok now under Louise O'Reilly. You can also find me on Instagram and on Facebook. If you love short form video, you probably get along quite well with me, because that's the thing that I love. And even if it's just something you're thinking about, is this something you want to be pursuing, you want to start learning about this stuff, just come and check me out, because I answer a lot of questions that a lot of people who are just starting on that journey ask. Just have a look at them, see if it's for you. By no means am I saying everyone has to do this. Like I said at the start of the podcast, I'm not here to change anyone. I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm not here to do anything of that sort. I have a beautiful vision where everyone is loved. And we really cherish and love sameness and difference as well. and that can all coexist in harmony. If you like that kind of vision, you can come along the journey too. So it's just for everyone.
It really is. And I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful to be in your membership. I'm so grateful to know you and to learn from you, and, you know, just continue to do this work in a way that I know makes a difference, but also in a way that also makes me as a person feel very safe as well, which, you know, I think is really important, that, you know, we can do this work and, you know, and be safe and be held regardless of, you know, any of our individual circumstances or backgrounds, you know, and especially I'm particularly grateful for the space that you hold, that is just divine and, you know, and really, really, you know, life-changing. So thank you so much. This has been such a juicy chat. I have to say, it's probably been one of my most favorite interviews to date. I'm just so grateful to have you here. And Louise, thanks again. Thank you for all your work. We'll make sure that everybody's got those access to the unconscious bias racism workshop, and also the for Cook, the status quo, you become a socially conscious CEO training series, a little mini course there that Louise is running, absolutely free. Seriously, that is the first way that I started working with Louise, was to have a look and opt into some of her free masterclasses. She blew my mind at the first one, and I think I messaged her and I was like, I missed the end because we had to go in the car somewhere, and I was like, but can you send me the link? I want to sign up. And I think that might have even been before she finished the masterclass. I was like, just, you know, give me the link. It's so worthwhile, and such a great investment in, you know, I want to say in modern Australian culture or global culture, whatever it be, it's an investment that makes a difference. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the listeners for hanging out, for the hanging out with us. You know, if you have any questions or anything, please don't hesitate. Please just get in contact with me. If you have any questions or anything, I have loads and loads of free resources, you know, podcasts, videos. There is just so much. So even if you aren't in a space where you do want to purchase anything, that is totally fine. Or if you're in a space where you're just like, let's just test this out, there is just so much for you. So please just check it out.
There really is. Louise's website is packed with freebies. And of course, just consuming your TikTok and Instagram content is going to make shifts for our listeners. So thanks, Louise, again. So much appreciation.
Welcome. Oh, thank you. Bye.